Welcome back to Ride the Stream. I am one half of our podcast vidcast duo. I'm Travis, joined by Michelle Brittany. We are in the midst of falling skies. Uh, Presently true for me as snow has just started coming down again in the Baltimore area. Michelle, how are things for you out in Arizona?
Oh, well, we're supposed to be 80 degrees. You wouldn't know it with me
Uh,
wearing a sweater, but I always run cold, so no surprise that I'd be in a sweater while everybody's in t-shirts. But yeah, I think we are supposed to be 80 degrees. In fact, this coming week, I think we're going to be like mid 80s, low to mid 80s. Um, and it's what, February still.
yeah. Uh, I'm over it, but we are here tackling episode three, entitled "Prisoner of War,"
Yep.
which I have aired, if I wrote down correctly, June 26th, 2011. Um, do you want to dive into any initial impressions before I do the synopsis, or should I just dive right in?
Mm, good episode. Lots of twists and turns. Interesting uh, how we handle prisoner of war in both camps. I thought was actually really fascinating. Really gave me a lot of things to think about. And yet had some humorous places as well, that we need when we're dealing with serious subjects.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely enjoying it. I'm watching it for a second time because I'd gone through like about the first season before we started, I think, talking about like doing a discussion on this one. So it is nice to go back and rewatch and catch more things and
Yeah.
just little nuances and stuff. So, what about you? Because I mean, you'd seen it before back when it was kind of originally aired. Your thoughts on that now?
Uh, yeah, I had never rewatched it up until now.
Hmm.
So I was watching, I think, when they would release it during the summer. Um, and I had watched, I think, three or four seasons of the five. Um, so coming back to it, I recognize the characters in some of the storyline, but it feels uh fairly fresh overall.
Hmm.
Um, I mean, this episode is, yeah, we'll talk about the whole, prisoner aspect and the the difference in how they're treated. So it, the one scene in particular is pretty brutal. So, um, yeah, those are my initial thoughts.
Hmm.
But
Okay.
I think I can go ahead and dive into the synopsis, and then we'll just get to the nitty-gritty right after that.
Hmm. Sounds good.
All right. All right, here we go. Tom and a small company are on top of a roof scanning a building across the street. There are harness kids on the ground and harness kids on the roof. They're collecting scrap metal. Those on the roofs are tossing them down to the ground, while mechs and skidders patrol the area. After a roof tile falls, exposing their position, they retreat under gunfire. When they return, Colonel Porter has returned with news. The scout teams have verified other fighting forces across the country, but that big, destructive looking building in Boston also appears in every other city they know about. Porter tells Tom that a surgeon is close to figuring out how to remove the harnesses and needs another test subject. He tells him he has permission to get Ben, and only Ben, because that's all they have time for. Well, the team that goes out to find Ben, but Mike sees his son, shouts for him, runs to grab him, and of course, a mech appears. Tom blasts explosives nearby in a hidden vehicle, destroying the mech, and they put Mike's son, Ricky, into the bed of their truck. Another mech appears. Tom is injured and pulls him into the truck, leaving Hal and Karen behind. Talk about an oh shit moment. They're cornered by a mech and ultimately they're taken. Now, when Hal awakens next to Karen, who is still unconscious, mechs and a lone skidder appear. Karen is taken away by harnessed kids, including his brother Ben, while the skidder then points to a group of other harnessed kids, and the mech kills them all. When Tom awakens from his injuries, he tells Di and Mike to get his son back to base, but he takes Di's shotgun, flashlight, and rope, saying he's going back. Along the way, he encounters a skidder. Despite being pinned, he's able to reach a shotgun, blast off a leg, and then another, before beating the aliens senseless with the barrel of the gun. We then see Tom dragging the Skinner through the high school hallway and tells Weaver he's bringing him a prisoner of war. Weaver asks if Tom took the Skinner down by himself, and Tom says yes, he just had to get close enough. Porter believes the alien should be studied by the new doctor, Michael Harris, the same one who can remove harnesses, although not yet successfully. Backing up to Tom and Michael's reunion, Michael apologized for not being able to save Tom's wife, Rebecca. He says he received a burn from trying to save her, but Tom eventually confronts Michael, saying that he knows he abandoned her because she still had the provision bag that was too heavy for her to carry alone. Michael tries to defend leaving Rebecca behind by saying he thought his expertise would be needed. And that's when Tom slugs him. Michael then blames Tom for Rebecca's death, saying it was him who was supposed to be with Michael when the invasion hit, but she loved him too much to wake him because he was too tired. Tom tells Michael that the Skidders won't win and that they should be the best of themselves for those who didn't make it. Michael just looks annoyed and walks away. Then we see the injured Skidder in its prison cell, and his eyes go all weird. And that's when Mike's son's eyes open. Uh-oh. And that's an episode.
Yeah.
I left some stuff out, but um, yeah, your overall take on this episode, there's a lot of different nuances going on. A lot of different turns with the new doctor's character, the reality of being a prisoner. Um, what say you with this one?
Oh my gosh. This felt like kind of a transition episode a little bit with regards to kind of the roles that are going on. Tom, it just like something clicks for him and he's like, I'm going after, I'm going to try and get my son back. Now and I can really empathize with that because now he's thinking, I could have lost two sons now. I've only got one back at camp. I have to do everything that I can to try to save Hal and, to try and save Ben because he's still trying to save Ben as well. So it took me off guard when I thought he killed the skidder actually, and then cuts to the next scene and he's dragging the skidder into the school. So real show turn of events. So that was like a big like, oh wow. I didn't really think Tom had that kind of lean to him or that he might snap in that way. Then like you towards the end when it's the two responses with regards to the skidder and mech when the mech actually um, executes the kids right in front of Hal. And then Tom's, as we've talked in the past, two episodes about Tom and him giving out history lessons. He gave one here about, the Nazis during World War II had done things like this.
Yeah.
Um, so that way the survivor goes back and say, "Oh my God, look at how horrible this was." As a way to demoralize and keep you off balance, right? So that happened, and then the fact that there definitely is something going on connection-wise, with regards to Ricky and the Skidder that is is a prisoner of war. The fact that there's some sort of connection going on there. So there's definitely intelligence going on, and that's really scary. The fact that they have a couple times now seemed to understand military warfare from an Earthling's point of view,
Yeah.
and the fact that they are using that. Um, so that, really stuck with me through this episode, that there's definitely more to me than meets the eye with regards to the aliens. The harness, the fact that Harris is there to take it off, um, makes me think, well, was it the right decision that he left Rebecca? Because he could almost argue that, well, she's the few versus the many that I could help. That kind of argument. So that was left on the table, but not really discussed, left for us ourselves as the audience to mediate.
And
So,
Tom didn't really argue that point.
no, he didn't. And it would be kind of like, well, if Harris had died, would they be at the point where they could take those harnesses, remove those harnesses? He knew quite a bit about them.
Yeah.
I also thought it was interesting that when he shot the two legs off the skidder, I'm like, that's total Pope methodology going on there.
Yeah.
So,
I think he
he
totally listened
obviously
to him.
is learning and adapting just like the aliens have learned and are adapting to the way we respond to warfare. So it's I think, I said transition, but it's also showing that this is definitely transition because it's much more complex than the surface and high level that we got in episode one and even episode two. We're now, kind of digging in and learning a lot more with each passing episode.
Yeah. It's really interesting to see, touching on you're talking about like Tom's evolution as a character and what maybe we didn't expect from him. Um, and he's learned from Pope's discussion where you got to go for the legs, take them down first, then it's easy or
Yep.
easier. And we see on the flip side, Pope spitting out food because it's he, described as like there's so much salt in it, it could give his kid a stroke. Um, and he has an entire conversation about how to prepare chicken and
Hmm.
essentially he, makes a deal that he'll become the resident chef for the camp. And um like I would have never, I forgot about that. I would have never imagined that coming out of his character. Obviously there's, intelligence, he's got some knowledge, I think he's
Yeah.
studied. But I would have never imagined Pope as a chef. Um, and so it's kind of like this, uh, the show is almost leaning into like these extreme differences within one character,
Hmm.
which maybe makes them more approachable. I don't know. Like seeing Tom take down a Skidder isn't something you would think of a, you know, history professor. Even though he's studying in military tactics, you don't applying those tactics is very different.
Yeah.
Um, and I, I still come back to the scene with the Hal and the Skitter, like as the Skitter kind of points towards the group of harness kids, almost like making sure Hal watches. Um,
Hmm.
and like I'm trying to think of the actor's name who plays Hal, but um, very believable. Like he's witnessing something horrific like that. His reaction to his father afterwards, because he's thinking that Tom like left him, like he didn't know that Tom was knocked unconscious, and
Yeah.
Tom has to like recover, you know, that information for Hal to say, "Hey, I would have never left. I was knocked out. I was going back for Ben." And then having Hal have to retell the account to him.
Hmm.
Um, I don't know if I felt this devastated the first time I watched it, but I damn sure felt bad watching it now. And that's maybe my perspective changing as a parent, but it was hard watching him like so upset in that moment.
Yeah, it really felt authentic, and it was like, what the hell? Did not see that coming, because I mean, I really thought, well, Hal's done. And the fact that they, chose that moment to make him a witness so that he could go back to camp, is interesting. There, the fact that the aliens are evolving too and how they respond to um, the the humans was just utterly fascinating and terrifying at the same time. Um, it's like you said, where you've got like these two extremes, and we really explored those in this episode. Um, I was totally thrown for a loop when, for example, Pope is also a cook. He's, a rebel, he's a criminal, and a certified culinary chef.
Yeah,
Did not expect to see that on his resume. So, the fact that we do have all these different extremes on spectrum is meant to, I feel, leave you kind of out of step. So that way you're not like trying to process, well, this person's a criminal, that's what he is. It's almost like trying to like confuse our minds, because our minds do try to make sense and logic out of things. And we do that, for instance, when we watch different shows or movies, that we use those established tropes to try to help us to understand. And so this is where I think that the writers did a wonderful job really kind of tweaking that on its ear. So that way we're thinking that we're getting to know Tom. We think we understand Pope, that we've seen enough that we know exactly what he is. And every time we're getting thrown a curveball in our understanding of these different characters. They keep them interesting, they keep them fresh. They keep us coming because we want to know, well, what else is in the toolbox of Pope? What else is Tom going to maybe go down a little bit of a slippery slope, theoretically and
yeah,
ethically? That makes this a very fascinating psychological study in human nature and human response to very traumatic experiences and events that occur. How do you deal with them? And it's almost like, studying, cases in PTSD and things like that, that I think is makes this interesting. As I was watching this, I had to keep reminding myself that Hal is only like 16 or 17 years old,
yeah,
and he's experiencing a lot of stuff. His girlfriend Karen has been taken. So he's lost her. He his dad disappeared, and he's initially thinking that his dad has left him behind. Um, and then the grand finale for him in this experience is that he has to watch these kids be executed because they've saved one kid that they have every right to save because, they're not meant to be slaves. They're our kids. They're our
Yeah.
next generation. So yeah, excellent to explore those different extremes in these characters and to keep us invested, keep us coming back for another week. And that's something that we really liked about Lost, is
Yeah.
just how well they intertwined all these characters. And again, here we have another series where, at least so far, we're only 3 episodes in, but we're seeing that same kind of strength of writing that pulls us in and keeps us hooked, because there are so many nuances to this show and to this episode. The fact that we find out that, oh, there's other groups that have survived. Well, now the story changes for the second Massachusetts group, because now it's not just get resources, it's get intelligence, which is what Tom was doing by bringing back a prisoner of war, because they've never had a prisoner of war before, not their group. So will they be able to communicate with the Skidder? I think, yeah, I think that there's probably some way to do that with Skidder or through some sort of network that's going on between the Skidders and the harnessed kids. There
Yeah.
must be some way to do that. So,
And speaking of the, extreme differences in each character, the introduction to Dr. Harris, the
hmm
first scene we see him, he's very uh, gentle, happy to see Tom, but maybe seeming a little bit apprehensive. And
hmm
then the next scene, he's preparing to remove the harness from Ricky and completely like egomaniac. Like Weaver asks him if he can do anything, and he just says, "Yeah, stay out of my way." Um,
Yeah, I was
and
like, boy, that's rude.
it's like so in two scenes, you see like this complete. So does he have both of those capabilities with him? But then by the time the episode ends and he's been drinking some scotch and he's letting his, I think, true nature show where he's talking about how they're conquered, even though Tom thinks that it's just beginning, like they're not conquered. And um, so, there's this kind of, well, is what he showed to Tom at the beginning just this facade to hide the truth of what actually happened? That's probably how I would take it. Um, how did you take Harris's character? Um, like the way kind of the way it started to where it ended. Um,
Yeah, I immediately, in that first scene, I felt like there was something up with Tom's character, like he was reserved, and a bit surprised to see Michael Harris. So something just felt and seemed kind of off between both of them. And yeah, you do kind of initially kind of think, oh, well, Dr. Harris is this cool guy. He's very gentle. He's happy to see Tom. You even get the perspective from Anne and from Lord's,
yeah,
their perspective, which seems to be positive, and that that they sense that he's knowledgeable, he's going to be helpful to them, and is looking forward to learning the process so that way, train the trainer, so that way she'll be able to be even of greater value. But didn't he say I don't know if it was in this episode where even Michael kind of puts down Anne, and I don't know, maybe that's in the next episode. But he does start showing his true colors. Um, but with Tom, but then it reveals even more his, where he's at, and he's not really a very good guy, you
No.
know? And I just am kind of like, wow, you think he's going to be this great thing, but he starts showing his true colors really quickly. Just like you said, especially like with Weaver. Weaver, who we've come to know,
Yeah.
and does have the civilians' interests is part of his directive. I mean, he takes that seriously. And then you have this newcomer who tells him to basically F off, get out of his
Yeah.
ER, get out of his OR, So I'm kind of like, whoa, okay, well, this is interesting. He's not here to make friends, as much as he is to, you know, try to be super doctor, and it's almost like, dude, you're not in a civilized world where your uh, your accomplishments are going to make a damn bit of difference in the medical journal.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, those are not being published right now. Um, so what you should be doing is going to be for the greater good, which is in conflict to what he says later. Well, I left Rebecca,
Yeah.
or well, he didn't out and out say, but Tom knows that he left Rebecca because he felt the greater good is in being a doctor available for more people. So it is kind of well, how do you mediate that? How do we as the audience mediate that? And I think that we fall on, could easily fall on both sides of the fence with regards to that. And it really does show how complex, you know, this character is very quickly
Yeah.
versus the evolution and the of our main characters, how the writers have taken a little bit more time. We start to understand their why they do the things they do. We understand why Tom brought the Skitter back to the school, in part because he wants a prisoner of war. He wants to find out what the heck is going on. Porter wants that. They want to defeat the aliens or at least get them off the planet. How do
Yeah.
we do that? Well, we've got to have some sort of edge. So, yeah, it was a interesting. Uh, Michael's an interesting character. Not likable, that's for sure.
Yeah. Um, Something telling about that interaction with Weaver reminded me of a conversation. Uh, I don't know what episode it was. I don't know if it was the first or second episode. Tom had asked Weaver, like, what would you do to get your kids back?
Hmm.
And in this episode, you know, Harris is talking about, um, when people pulled off harnesses, the kids would die. And he said that, you know, like he said they learned the hard way about that. And Weaver says, yeah, a lot of us did. And it makes me wonder, did that happen to him? Like, did that happen to
Oh,
one of his
yeah.
kids?
Hmm.
Um, and I honestly cannot remember, but I just was like, that one comment, and his refusal to leave the room, even when Harris was like, "Oh, don't you want to be outside somewhere?" Like, basically wanting him to leave, and Weaver would not budge. So it makes me feel like he's invested in this,
Yeah.
in some way, and he's not just a cold military leader. I think, a part of him that maybe we're starting to see the layers of him underneath that. You know, he wants to win the war, yes, but Like you said, he's still responsible for civilians and making sure that, you know, they do what they can. As Tom highlighted, saving the Hornets kids does give everyone hope.
Yeah.
So, yeah, so a very interesting episode. I think there's a lot that we reveal about the characters, and you're right. I think they dive into Harris's complex ego and uh, you know, it makes me wonder about him in the future. How believable is he going to be? Because of how much of a front he put up with Tom when we first met him.
Hmm.
And it's like, oh man, is he gonna say whatever he wants to get his way? So I know with Lost, we talked about like who are the reliable narrators.
Hmm.
And in this episode, maybe if the interaction we get with him first held through most of the episode, we think, oh, okay, maybe there's some like ability to recognize what he's saying and, he means what he says. But after that first scene, it just kind of goes downhill from there. And like you said, very unlikable. And I don't feel like, at least in the short term, we can believe him as a narrator. Because I don't know if what we hear from him would be any bit of accuracy to it. Like, I don't know.
Yeah, I definitely don't know that he's very reliable, that's for sure. And, what's he going to do when faced with something life-threatening again? Is he going to turn tail and run again? That's my expectation. You can't rely on him. Um, and he's a good study when you look at then also Tom. Um, and him, they're each knowledge based people. They have a certain amount of knowledge that they bring. And I would much rather have Tom covering my back and being there than Michael, because I don't think Michael would have my back in the slightest. So I don't know where I was going with
100%.
that point. There was something I was going to say about that. Yeah, just not reliable. At the same time, he tried to say that Tom, oh, this is the point I was going to make. At the same time, he's not reliable because he tries to make Tom feel guilty, to put some of the blame on Tom. And I'm sorry, it sounds like Rebecca made the decision to go out in place of Tom. Like maybe I could see this totally happening. She was supposed to wake him up, or he was supposed to wake up and go out on this scavenger, hunt to get resources. And she went in his place because he was sleeping. He'd been out most of the night or whatever.
Yeah.
Um, and I could see that happening. But, the fact of the matter is that Michael was not above trying to implicate Tom in his own decision to turn tail and run. Well, you
Yeah.
should have been the one there. This wouldn't have happened if you had gotten your ass out of bed, and had gone on maneuvers with me.
What
But
an accusation.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. I thought that was pretty low.
Yeah. I think we'll probably talk a little bit more about that when we discuss our questions. But maybe for now we'll take a quick break and come back.
Sounds good.
All right, we'll be right back. Hey everyone, it's Travis with Ride Stream. Just want to say thank you for joining us today. Michelle and I love having our conversations, and if you get anything out of it that makes us feel better, thank you for tuning in. If you can, please subscribe. If you haven't already, like the video. And if you have a chance to pass the video on to a friend who enjoys something that we've covered, whether it's the Thursday Murder Club, Lost, The Martian, whatever, that'd be great. And I guess nothing else to say, but thanks, and we'll get back to the chat. And we're back, talking to Falling Skies, season one, episode three.
Yep.
Uh, we left off talking about the uh, interesting Harris character,
Hmm.
and I kind of want to jump to if you're new here, we do a series of questions. First, favorite or most interesting scene. A second, favorite or most interesting character, and then we do like a wild card for a third question. I kind of want to jump into the wild card question. Uh, since we were talking about Harris, um, let me pull up the question here. I wanted to ask you, who is the more devilish character?
Hmm.
Especially with our introduction to those characters. Is it Pope or Michael, the Doctor?
Hmm. That is a really good question.
Polar opposites, but equally
Yeah.
vile to a
I'm
degree.
kind Well, you know what I'm thinking? I'm kind of thinking Pope has not ever not been truthful to who he is as a
Mm,
person, which I think um you know what you're getting. I mean, the culinary chef aside, kind of generally speaking, because this is in a survival situation, um, I do kind of feel that Pope has been pretty clear about what he's all about, versus Michael, who is a doctor, is a respected person in the community prior to all this going on, but he's also chicken shit. Sorry to say. But, I guess he's never indicated that he is, brave, but I think there's an unwritten expectation is that as a human being that you will try to protect others. That's your Hippocratic oath.
yeah,
And yet, when push came to shove and you've got aliens, he turned tail and run and left her there. Um, so I think he's the more dangerous one because you think that he might be okay, and he presents this facade that he is.
yeah,
And and even with the way that he treats Weaver in the operating room, he is in his element. I can kind of understand it. But the fact that we're privy to Tom's suspicions and how he mediates what he's seen as proof that Michael left his wife unprotected, and left to the aliens. It does make it very hard to have any sort of empathy towards Michael
yeah,
because the Hippocratic Oath says that you will protect. I believe you're supposed to protect it is about the welfare of the patient and doing the best that you can for the patient. So, in general, I'm going to say.
yeah,
So if that's the case, I mean, that should kind of translate to the people around you that you'd want to do the same thing. It's kind of like if you're a policeman, you're there to serve and protect. Well, that kind of, ends up being a big part of who you are outside of when you've got your uniform on. So there is kind of that inherent expectation that Michael should be similar to his doctor occupation,
Yeah,
I guess. So that's why I'm leaning towards that Michael is the more devious and the more villainous character. Oh, hey, hurry. Cleo came in.
Bing.
You got to see Tale of Cecily all the time. Sam is completely relaxed over here. And then Cleo. Oh, so
There we
nice.
go.
Yeah, so that's three. So if you were trying to count, at the beginning of the episode, if you guess three, although we still got time, there may be more. Never know.
There's a
Um,
chance.
yes, there is a chance. So yeah, I do think Michael. I mean, Pope is dangerous, but he's never been dishonest about his motivation,
Yeah,
I would say. Um, so you know immediately not to necessarily trust him. Um, so I would think Michael is the more dastardly character.
yeah.
What are your thoughts as the progenitor of this very difficult question?
It's yeah, it's we touched on it offline, where when I saw his character and how we saw the layers quickly pulled off of his veneer. He reminded me of the Lost character, Jack's father, Christian, and how
Hmm.
despicable he was, and made me think, oh man, I hope this dude does not have any kids. Um, uh, the only thing that, like, I want to say it's Harris. Like, I want to say he's the more villainous one. The only thing that could tip it is, what did Pope know with regards to Margaret's character? Like,
Hmm.
she had a couple guys abusing her. And, if he knows about that and lets it happen, oh, like that's pretty hard and I didn't think about that when I initially thought of this question. Um, because I was so because Pope has, we talked about it last week, where he has this element of charm to him that's uh somehow Sawyer-esque. And
Hmm.
um so I hope that maybe he was blind to it all, but I feel like that would be naive to think that he didn't know that they were doing that to her. Because if that's the case, I guess I feel like my answer would be him. Man, Harris's character,
Yeah.
I felt the rage in Tom building before he punched him.
Hmm.
Uh, mm, yeah,
Yeah, you bring up a really good point about Pope, and I'd forgotten about the Margaret's deal. You know, and why she so easily switched sides and wants to be part of Weaver's group. Um, I'm thinking if this is where really kind of like, did he know?
yeah,
If he didn't know, which seems kind of like unbelievable, but he did leave her there to with the prisoners
hmm
and with his brother, whether that's brother by blood or brother in combat. We, don't necessarily know that. And the other guy, who obviously, I mean, I think those were the two that had abused her.
hmm
Would he have left her there with them? Did she prove some amount of loyalty where he just said, oh well, you know? Um, I don't know. That's really complex, and I would almost think that, well, maybe he wasn't one involved with the harassment and rapes that
Yeah.
was going on. Ooh, I probably shouldn't have said that. I don't know. Well, we're not monetized anyway, so it doesn't matter. But bad word.
I
Um,
mean, yeah, that's what happened to her
yeah,
character.
yeah. So, I mean, if he wasn't involved in that whole situation, then maybe he had suspicions and decided to just not act on it or make a fuss or do anything to protect her because she was part of the group.
Yeah.
Um, so I don't know. That really does add a layer that makes it very gray with regards to his character. He
But it's not,
strikes
yeah, it's
me.
not even, it's never
Yeah,
brought up. Um, and
no,
you make a point, like if he knew about that, they're supposed to be watching. Like he left Margaret there to make sure like his quote unquote brother didn't like just start killing people.
yeah,
Um, so that could lead to the fact that maybe he was unaware and that maybe he trusted her more than the others. Um,
probably that in
so
that in spite of the way that let's just say that the brother and the cue ball treated her, maybe Pope was unaware of that, or in spite of that, she was still a good soldier and more reliable than cue ball and the brother, which who sounded like he was just kind of a trigger happy, like maybe both were kind of trigger happy, and that he was more about, the opportunity to kill skitters.
yeah.
Maybe that was his primary focus and cooking. But
Uh,
I'm because we don't have enough there,
yeah, that's
I'm
fair.
gonna go with Harris. For the simple fact we don't have the whole story on the other. I mean, we don't really have the whole story either, but that goes back to your whole reliable narrator. And I most assuredly believe Tom to be a more reliable narrator than Harris.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. So
Okay.
I think that's why I'd have to say
Yeah.
that
No,
Harris.
that's totally valid. I despise that guy. Well, moving back to the first question, when we look at the various scenes throughout the episode, did you have a favorite or most interesting? Was there a short list? Um,
I'm going to be honest with you. I didn't write anything down for either one.
that's okay.
And that's mostly because I figured as we were conversing, I'd probably, really kind of find the one. Um, I'm gonna go with two, and they're very different. Um, I'm gonna go with, for the humorous side, um, the exchange between Scott and Pope when it's revealed that Pope is actually a certified chef. I like how Scott says something to the effect when Pope is criticizing his cooking that Scott says, "You know you're the prisoner, right?" So I really
That's on
love
my
that
list.
scene. I
Yeah.
love that scene. That was my humorous scene. So I'll leave it there. I have another scene, but how many do you have on your list?
Oh boy.
Oh boy.
Let's see. I've got five.
Oh my goodness. Well, you better reveal a few of yours then.
Well, I do have the Pope being fed food, spitting it out, and then critiquing it.
Hmm.
Totally catches you off guard. It's funny seeing Scott's reaction to him bitching about the food as a prisoner.
Yeah.
Um, Um, I think two of them I could combine.
Okay.
Um, another scene I'll mention as a highlight is just the variation in Michael's stories to Tom from beginning to end. And
Mm-hmm.
just like how he tried to present himself to then how he actually perceives himself,
Mm-hmm.
and the reasoning why he did the things. It just complete 180 in the type of character that he is. Um, so I thought that the way they did that was really smart. Like it kind of
Mm-hmm.
just hits you in the gut when you're like, damn, that was brutal to turn that back around on Tom. Like,
Yeah.
so that's my one of my other honorable mentions.
Yeah, I would say that that would have been would be one of my honorable mentions as well, because that was pretty that was a hit below the belt, to try to implicate Tom as part of or all of the guilty parties with regards to Rebecca's death.
Yeah.
I would say another scene that I thought was really um, poignant would be the one where Tom and his team come back from the hospital and the desperation of different people just trying to find out if Tom and his group had seen their kids.
Yeah.
How desperate they were, and you could feel the tension, the weariness of Tom's group at the fact that they weren't able to bring any kids home, and just the worry. And you know, it's palpable the worry that all of them had. And the fact that somebody came up with the idea to like, well, hey, we have this bulletin board. Put your kids up there, put your pictures of your kids up there.
Yeah.
Um, Write down any identifying details where you saw them, whatever, to be able to help the groups that were going out. If they can, if they have any sightings, they can let the parents know to give them some sort of news as to what's going on.
Yeah.
Um, so I actually like that scene. So
Yeah.
I'll
No, yeah,
yeah,
forgot about that scene. It's very realistic.
yeah.
I mean, it's like you feel it for those parents, like,
Hmm.
because who wouldn't be pleading for news on their kids? Like, oh,
Yeah.
um,
What's another one you got?
so
I think I've got two more.
I'm gonna my favorite scene I'll combine into one. So my last honorable
Hmm.
mention is um basically the sequence with Tom and the skidder, and ultimately um creating the commotion of everyone stopping in their tracks and watching as he drags this thing down the hallway. It's I think you mentioned it's unexpected.
Hmm.
Would have never, by watching the first couple episodes, yes, he's second in command, but you don't perceive him as a trained officer in any way,
Mm-mm.
or you know trained soldier. Um, and the shock in Weaver's voice, like, you did this yourself. Like, I think as a viewer, I felt the same way. It's like,
Yeah.
and so I really appreciated, you know, not just the fact that, he was injured before he even went searching for
Hmm.
Hal and Karen and Ben, but using, like you said earlier, like using Pope's information
Hmm.
and that saved his life. Like,
Yeah.
so I really liked that moment. So
Yeah, I thought that was a really good moment. I also like how they added the little bit of humor at the end where Tom says, "Can I trade this in for an automatic?" And I think Weaver says, "Yep, whatever you want."
Yeah. Yeah. Weaver just like points to one of the sentries and it's like, give me your give me your weapon. Yeah, that was good.
Yeah, yeah. My favorite scene, and I hate to say it's my favorite scene, but I think it had the most impact, and that was when Hal had to watch the kids being executed, and
Yeah.
the whole historical reference behind it, the how traumatic it is not just for Hal as a 16 or 17 year, really still a teenager
Yeah.
who should have been in high school, you know, um, and here he is having to experience that and then survive it, um, and survive because he's got to go back and tell everybody else what happened. That it was very deliberate. And, there is that sense that the why me? Why do I get to survive and not,
Yeah.
X, Y, and Z, kids, for instance. Um, and they didn't harness him either. So he wasn't harnessed and they didn't kill him and they let him go. Um, so yeah, I thought that was a very, very powerful moment in the episode.
Yeah. That's the one I put up there. I merged that with him t also telling Tom about it. Um,
Yeah.
just because I feel like the two are, blended together. And uh Hal just, rightfully so, looks traumatized. Um, and I can't imagine something like that. And having Tom retell what happened in, you know, world history with the Nazis, like,
Hmm.
it's a big gut punch. And uh but I think that's how we, that's kind of the lesson that's supposed to be learned from history is to make sure that crap
Hmm.
doesn't happen again. Um so yeah, I'm right there with you.
Yeah.
Um with regards to character,
Hmm.
was it was it easy? Did you have a couple as far as a favorite or not necessarily a favorite or most interesting? Like,
Um, yeah, I think two, for different reasons, obviously. But so my two, Tom, for the total turn, to bring home a prisoner of war, to bring home a skitter, that that, and then the fact that all this other internalization of Dr. Harris crap that's going on in his mind, stirring up, his feelings about having lost his wife, the fact that, he lost Ben, his youngest is worried and feeling the weight of, well, what happens to Ben? Can you get the harness off? Will he die? All these type of things that it's kind of funny because at the early in the episode where Porter is back and he's having a conversation with Tom, and he's like, "Ah, I thought I'd be golfing and, reading the books on my side table and, this and that." And I mean, there's not a big discussion about it, but that kind of stays in your mind. And you look at these young kids, and it's like they should be in school. Where are they at? They're in a school, but they're not in regular classes and going home in the evening. They
yeah,
live there, for survival reasons. They're not in class. The lessons they are getting are lessons that are going to help them to survive, you know. And how scary is that? So, I thought that, Tom dealing with all of that as a parent. And then on the flip side, Hal, having to go through all the trauma that he did. And as a person that's supposed to be 16 years old, um, yeah, I'm sorry, I'm repeating myself on that point, but
No, it's
it's really um, so important to remember, just how this Hal is supposed to be, and yet he's experiencing so many things that none of us will ever have to experience.
yeah,
But his character has got all these things going on, and he's got so much responsibility. And now he has the, responsibility of surviving. Um, and it's a deliberate survival. He should have been dead by all accounts. That
yeah,
mech should have taken him out. And the mech didn't, you know. And the skidder then's like, yeah, watch over here. This is you. This is because of you. We're now going to
yeah,
kill all these kids. What kind of, you know, the guilt that he's having to carry. And I'd almost think that maybe that's, one of the themes of this episode is the, you know, guilt, uh, theme of guilt,
yeah,
among the various characters, because they all have it. Tom has it. Michael Harris has some guilt, that, he kind of cops to. Hal now does. Weaver has something in his background.
yeah.
Yeah, it's just showing the complexity. So those were my two that I went with.
Okay.
How about you?
Let's see. Obviously, I listed Tom. Um, uh, I did mention Dr. Glass, Annie. She still's not getting a lot of screen time,
Mm-mm.
but I do feel like this episode kind of highlights her as she's able to think on her feet and solve problems, and she helps more than just Tom. But when he's like, I think she might have been the one to recommend, putting the kids' pictures on the bulletin board at first,
Mm-hmm.
um, or at least she was part of like encouraging people to do that. Um, she, I feel like she can judge whether or not Harris maybe has the best of intentions, because she'll be around him more often, I
Yeah.
assume. And just I don't know. She obviously has a good rapport with Tom, and like they have this kind of banter between them. Like I think when he comes back at the beginning of the show, and he's just like, "Oh, I love what you've done with the place," and
Yeah.
um,
Welcome
so
home. Yeah.
yeah. So I feel like we still haven't seen too much from her, but I feel like she's becoming more of a necessary linchpin for the whole
Mhm.
community. Um,
Yeah, I
and
feel like she's one of the characters that's kind of grounds everybody else. Like she's one of those. Kind of like in a way that Kate was with.
thinking the same thing.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah, totally. So my top pick, not to give, so I'm not going to give it to Tom for 3 episodes in a row. Unfortunately, the most I'm going to list it as most interesting and not favorite, and that's the Dr. Michael Harris. Um,
Boo, boo.
yeah, uh,
But I
there
totally
is
get it. I totally get it.
there's a range of duplicity there that's alarming, and I think you're right. What is he going to do when his back is against the wall again? Because you have to assume it's going to happen. They're
Mm-hmm.
at war. He already thinks that they're conquered. Um, and the way that he's able to kind of shift blame so easily.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and, I obviously not fond of him, but I think he also presents a a problem to the group
Hmm.
potentially moving forward? Like, will he at some point, like, make demands of somehow and use his expertise as the bargaining chip to make sure he gets what he wants?
Yeah.
He seems like that type of person. Um, so I'm really curious to see, you know, where do we go from here?
Hmm.
Um, like you said, we discovered his character very quickly, while other characters were kind of like learning as we go along.
Hmm.
Um, and with this season only being 10 episodes, I have to imagine that we're gonna I feel like we're gonna discover some more hard truths along the way.
Yeah.
Um, and I can definitely picture him as being part of those hard truths. So,
Hmm.
um, about this episode, before we dive off, is there anything that we haven't touched on that you think would be worth mentioning?
Yeah, there's one thing, and I know you and I talked about this offline, and I know we're coming up to finishing up, so it might be, something that we definitely revisit. And that is, as in our own contemporary time here, um, as there's lots of discussion around AI and its use and function, how would that work in falling skies if we're invaded by aliens and based on our interpretation and culture, around AI and all the knowledge that supposedly exists there. It's in its infancy to some degree, but the fact is that, it's touted as something where you can just put a question in and you'll get an answer back. What do you do when you're invaded by aliens or you have a complete blackout or something like that? AI is not there for you, and you have to rely on your own knowledge, your experience. Um, and I just think that one of the lessons there is that AI cannot be a replacement for doing the hard work of studying and developing that knowledge that's stored in our own brains up here. And I think that's very important. And that was definitely something that I pulled, just kind of mediating from what I'm hearing in the world today
Yeah.
and thinking about, well, if we are a society of AI and we're so reliant on it at, in the near future, what does that do for us if some sort of cataclysmic thing happens and suddenly, you know, we can't be attached to this
Yeah.
24/7. We
Yeah.
can't come to this and get all the answers. So, um, one of the things that I thought about when people had their pictures of their kids, I'm like, you know where my pictures are of my fur babies? They're in here.
Yeah.
They're not, I don't have a wallet with, you know, 7 pictures of different kitty cats, um, and all the ones that come and visit. But it's like that, that really shows how time has changed from the time of this episode, this series, versus where we are today. And
Yeah.
it's always kind of interesting how shows and movies deal with technology. And I think we pin this and we talk about it, in a future episode when I think that we'll have some more technology stuff come up. But, the fact that how do these different shows deal with that technology question? Because it is a real question that when you're trying to write a story and you're trying to have a narrative, um, and you're in a society where everything's right at your fingertips. It really, really is. You can gather so much information from your phone now.
Yeah.
How do you deal with that when you're talking about something that's meant to be kind of contemporary? How do you deal with technology? So I think, definitely let's have a discussion about that later. But if, you know, this is open for people to have comments downstairs.
Great
Who your favorite
question.
character is, what was your favorite scene? Who's the greater evil between, Michael Harris and the character Pope? And what do you think about technology and, you know, how would we survive today or in the near future if we're as reliant on AI as we're being led to do? So,
Yeah. I definitely think we can approach the AI in more Falling Skies episodes. I totally agree. I think technology should be a tool, like not a complete replacement. Um,
mhm,
AI is, I think, the term of the century right now, where it's the new catchy thing that's supposed to somehow create content and generate information, but ultimately that has to come from somewhere. And it's if it's being fed things that, and if it's ciphering information that's not accurate. So
mhm,
I'm not a fan of AI. I think it's just not worthy of being so put out there so quickly without having a better understanding of how it should be regulated.
mhm,
But we'll come back to that another time.
definitely.
Um,
And in case
uh,
people are not aware, none of this content is AI generated. We are two totally human beings. We are not aliens. We are not AI, or anything like that. This is content from our brains. So,
Absolutely.
yeah, I'm also not a huge fan of AI as a content creator and as a artist. Yeah, I'm definitely not a fan of AI. So there it is. Sorry, but I'm sorry, not sorry.
Yeah. And I guess on that note, uh, thank you for everyone who is watching or having us on in the background. Please like and subscribe.
Yep,
And hit the notification bell so you can be notified of our weekly video releases every Friday, 9 a.m. Eastern Standard Time.
yep,
Um, and I guess until next time, down with AI. We will see everyone on the flip side.
definitely.